Welcome, everybody, to Sober Life Podcast. I'm your host, Scott Jones. I want to thank you for joining us, whether you're watching us live or watching a recording. Either way, I hope you enjoy the programming. If you don't recognize the name, it's because this is part of our rebranding. We now have our Sober Life Studios, and we have our Sober Life podcast, that's what we're dealing with today. We have a special guest to kick off this show. A friend of mine from, where are you from?
Pinellas County.
Pinellas County. For those of you who don't know geography, really goodly, that's over near Tampa.
Yes.
Is that right?
Yes, sir.
Yeah, that's right. Because I saw the sign for Tampa while I was in Pinhead County there, or Pinellas. Pinellas. No, great place over there. That includes like Tampa, what else is over there?
So Pinellas County includes Clearwater and St. Pete. Those
Okay.
are the big cities there. It's right next to Tampa, just on the other side of the bay. And
Okay.
It's just south of Pasco, Newport Richey area.
It's a beautiful area.
It's really nice. I mean, it's like 3 or 4 cities all mashed into one.
Yeah. Well, we had the pleasure of being over there in training. But anyway, from Pinellas County over there, this is Will Atkinson, and you are you one of the founders or a director?
So I'm one of the founders as well as the executive director of the Recovery Epicenter Foundation. We are a recovery community organization that serves the Tampa Bay region.
Okay. All right. Just check this out real quick. We may be having a technical. We have storms outside, ladies and gentlemen. We do have storms. Just do me a favor and just say hello again.
Hello.
There we go. All right. So that's what we need to do there. Okay. So anyway, we do have somebody tuning in already. A couple people. Oh, wow. Debbie Bettendorf is watching live. Good friend of mine. Karen's watching. All right. From the other room. Debbie, thanks for tuning in. All right. So the Recovery Epicenter Foundation. Tell me, what exactly is that?
So the Recovery Epicenter Foundation was formed as a way to include people in recovery themselves and begin to utilize the personal experience with professional training that William White pioneered through his white pages. So we started out as essentially an education and training platform that grew into a peer support community where we provide today the first peer respite center for the Tampa Bay region, as well as building and monitoring a collegiate recovery program on St. Pete College. We've been around for a while, since 2017, and very lucky to be funded through our managing entity, Central Florida Behavioral Health Network, to provide education, outreach, stigma reduction efforts for our community.
Excellent. Now, let me ask you something. You mentioned this peer respite, because we're going to assume that people don't know a lot of these terms.
Okay.
So, first of all, you're servicing people in recovery. We're talking about specifically alcoholism addiction, or do you serve any other modalities?
Persons with a substance use disorder oftentimes have co-occurring mental health disorders. Right. One of the functions of peer support work is to connect individuals to the services that they need. So if somebody needs higher levels of care or care that we aren't able to provide, we connect those individuals to mental health services.
I think there might be people out there thinking, it's like, hey, William, great, wonderful, that's fine. However, they've already gone to treatment.
Yep.
They're sober. Why don't they just pick themselves up by the bootstraps and work like everybody else? I'm just saying, just devil's advocate. There's probably people out there saying, why is it necessary to have this kind of service?
Okay. I love this question. So I'm a person in long-term recovery myself, and we tend to view substance use disorders as if humans are cars that can go into for a tune-up and be fixed. We try and treat it as, all right, they went through treatment, they spent the 28 days, or sometimes they're 6 months or 18 months, however long it is. They now have this experience in recovery, and thus they should be better. They can now go and do everything throughout the rest of their lives as if they never had a substance use disorder to begin with. But unfortunately, human beings are not cars that can go in for a tune-up. What we need to learn is how to overcome this learned helplessness and intrinsic knowledge response to the world around us that active drug and alcohol abuse created within us. So we can do just great in a controlled setting. And then the minute that we leave, all of a sudden it just all falls apart because we just do not know how to apply the tools that we learned in that controlled setting in a real world setting. So peer support and the guidelines and the supports that we offer, either through accredited sober living or someone who will come and work directly with you through the processes, allows them a little bit more of a connection that allows them to maintain their connection to their recovery that otherwise they would just let go of in their own isolation.
Right. So obviously backing up their recovery in that sense of staying connected is important. Even if they're doing the other things, maybe a self-help groups, 12-step groups, therapy, church, whatever it might be, it's still good to be connected to a larger scale of people that are doing different things. But is there also a component in here that we have to think about is there's a lot of missed time when you're talking about somebody who's been in alcoholism and drug addiction, substance abuse disorders, however you want to label it, it's all the same. That amount of time was lost where emotional development, interpersonal skills, business skills, understand, all of those things were ignored. So you're almost behind the eight ball. And let's talk about an average period of drinking and using at 15 years. That's 15 years of no growth. And then all of a sudden you're thrown out into the world and it's like, well, I never did that before. I never did that before. So is that also a reason that you exist?
Without a doubt. So I started using when I was 14 years old. So when I came into recovery, I finally got sober. I was 14 years old emotionally.
So how old were you though, physically?
So I was lucky from a certain point of view. At the time, I thought I was very unlucky. The window for active drug and alcohol abuse for me opened and closed quickly. I had bottomed out and become suicidal by 19 years old.
Okay.
And I had parents who were willing to send me to Hazelden in Minnesota. And I had an opportunity to start my recovery journey there. It stuck at 21. I'm grateful to say I'm not a one-chip wonder. If you're in a 12-step group, that's the pathway that I go through. So I had to retest the waters a couple of times. But inevitably, I was like, no, I have a problem. This doesn't work for me. If I could drink and drug successfully, I wouldn't be in recovery.
So during that period of using, even though it was like we're talking about a 5 to 6 year period, that was all, and that's the transition from young teen to the young adult.
Yes,
or an adult. So you missed some developmental time there.
Yes.
So like you said, all of a sudden you get sober, you look around and you're just like, well, wait a minute. The last time I was actually paying attention, I was only 14. Now what? Is that what we're talking?
Absolutely. And I wasn't like I was a well-adjusted 14-year-old before I'd picked up, drinking and drugging anyway. So it was one of those in early recovery, I could have been better supported with the peer support networks and peer supports that we've developed today because I didn't have that connection or guide outside of my 12-step sponsor to help me with every day-to-day living experiences.
Let's see, Debbie's saying being able to place people with the appropriate care is a huge service.
Absolutely.
Oh, absolutely. Now we've talked, you haven't developed normal living skills that maybe somebody else has developed. So we need that extra help. You need to be connected to more people that are doing what you're doing. Talk about that. And Debbie's making a great point. We don't even know, or let's say somebody who's new in recovery doesn't even understand what services are available to them.
Yeah.
As a matter of fact, people who work in the industry, we're still ignorant to a lot of things where we say, well, we can't help you and we don't know who can. But you guys, that is your job, is to figure out how to help and who can help, right?
Absolutely. So we're the glue that connects all the different services throughout the area, simply because we are people who do not have a vested interest in the outcome. So we aren't trying in any way to get you connected to a thing that benefits us. What we are doing is we are working with you based on your needs, finding out what in the community supports that, connecting you to it, and walking with you through it, because there's some fear associated with doing these new things.
Yes.
There's some fear associated with being able to actively pursue positive mental health, our recovery, jobs, things that we haven't really been doing.
Absolutely. And like you said, what he was trying to, I want to make sure everybody understands this. The Recovery Epicenter Foundation has no financial interest.
None.
They certainly have a vested interest in wanting everybody to be okay. That's what you're there for.
Well, and nobody
But
gets
there
into this
is
without
no financial interest. You do not benefit financially from somebody attending a program or not attending a program, or from taking a service or not taking a service. So yours is all about really doing what's best for the client.
That's the goal, and it's based on what they want. So they will come to us and say, here are the goals that I want to achieve, and we do a recovery management plan with them, as well as recovery capital assessments through Faces and Voices recovery data platform.
See, that's a beautiful thing, to marry what you have to offer with what they want.
Yep.
Instead of simply saying, this is what you need, do it.
Yeah, we don't do that. Yeah, we don't.
They've already had enough of that in early recovery, I'm sure, right at the beginning.
Well, and if you're like me, if you're in recovery and somebody tells you what to do as opposed to helps you achieve your goals, my instant reaction, even if I agree with it, is to tell them where to,
Yeah. We can say it on this show.
We can. Okay, cool. I didn't know. I didn't want to talk out of turn.
Debbie saying, thanks for being the glue. We all thank you for what you're doing there, my friend. But so we've got all of these. We're talking about connecting people to taking the next steps in their lives, doing the things they need to do, connecting to services and benefits that they might not know they have. Now, you mentioned the word pure respite, and
Yes.
We're starting to hear that more and more. Not a term that 5 years ago had a meaning, or at least not much of a meaning. Now it does. What is that?
I want to give a huge shout out to Fellowship Sober Living in RCO in Broward County. They pioneered this work here in Florida, and without their work, we wouldn't be able to do what we're doing.
Our friend Rick Riccardi and his family and his friends and everybody who worked over there and put that together. Well done. Incredible
program. What has been a struggle for those of us in the recovery space for years is finding appropriate placement for people who return to active use. So if somebody picks up a drink or a drug after a period of abstinence, we then search for a detox or a treatment center that'll accept them. Most of the time, the minute that you've returned to active use, you haven't yet met the medical threshold of necessary detox care. So it makes it really difficult to get people the help that they need, where they'll say, you got to come back drunker, or you need to take this drug before we can accept you. In this day and age, with the drugs being the way they are, any gap in service is inviting them to not make it back. And so we have created a space, once again, with the guidance of Fellowship here in Broward County, where someone who has returned to active use and or just has a gap in their care can come to the respite center, be surrounded by peer support workers, either to sleep it off and get re-engaged in their recovery the next day, or to be engaged in a community environment of peers, groups, fun recovery events before they move on to their next stage, which would be an accredited sober living or a treatment center if they need that higher level of care, or to wherever referred them. So we are a 3 to 14 day brief housing opportunity for individuals to connect to the services that they need.
So, it's like a shelter situation, but with so much more involved in it.
Yes,
certainly. You're not just giving them hots and a cot to get them through. You're giving them support and guidance and help. And it's really hard when there's not that in between level. You're right. It's like, well, I can't get into this detox. I can't even get across town to that other detox. I don't even know what's going on. And it's really easy just to say, screw it, I got no place to go.
Yeah.
You fix that. With the respite centers, it's like you do have a place to go, especially when you don't know where to go. This is really good.
So I have two stories for this, actually. Yeah. And the first is really proud of this. We've only been open since the end of March. We had a young lady who needed to go to hospital, and from that hospital was going to go to a treatment center. Mm-hmm. But the treatment center couldn't pick her up directly when she was being discharged from the hospital. So for 3 hours, she knew where to go. She came to the respite center, had the treatment center pick her up directly from the respite center. So for those 3 hours that otherwise she would have been just out walking the streets, we had an opportunity to keep somebody safe before they got onto that next level of care.
Wow.
And that's the intent of what we're trying to do, is provide that type of
Bridge the
stopgap. Exactly. The second story, and this is all where this onus comes from, was a young man named Adam, who I had the privilege of working with way back in 2012 at my sober living program, Tampa Bay Sober Living. He was a younger gentleman who was really not in recovery yet for his own reasons. He was more there because his parents wanted him to be there, type of thing.
Yeah.
But he had just gotten out of treatment, and within 3 days of coming into my home, he was drinking. And so I pulled him aside, gave him a breathalyzer. He failed, and I was like, "Okay, man, we got to go pack your stuff." And as he was packing his stuff, we're talking, and I'm like, "Hey, man, why? Like, you just got here. What's going on?" And with tears in his eyes, he said, "I have no idea." And that's the type of person who I've always wanted to help. Is the person who is like, "Okay, cool, man, let's figure this out together. Let's address this." But in a sober living home that's abstinence based, and it has to be. If housing first is important, but having abstinence based environments is incredibly important as well.
Absolutely.
So now I have an opportunity to help people like Adam, because in the past, and still to this day, I will always choose to protect the community over any one individual. And if you're drinking or using, that makes you a threat to a recovery community. But now I can help Adam too. And so that's the opportunity, is when somebody doesn't know why, now they're not just homeless or dropped off at a hotel or doing that rat race trying to find out where they're going to get into treatment or detox next. It's, let's go to the respite center. Let's work it out with the peers. And who knows, maybe once you get stabilized, we're going to bring you right back to the sober living environment.
That is incredible. And you're right. I mean, you have to protect the community first.
Yes.
The needs of the many outweigh the needs of the few, or the one, certainly. But to have an option so you can help both, and because there's not always going to be a situation where somebody can relapse and then walk right into a recovery situation or a medical situation or a treatment situation. There are gaps all the time, and people get lost and die in those gaps. They die in those gaps.
They do.
So this is really important. We got some other people. So Debbie's commenting. She says, "So you work with people who really want help,
and people
that's
who
not something you're not running around trying to recruit people. This is open for those people who really need it and or need a place.
They need a place. They want a place, and at the same time, developing an assessment for willingness is such a fluctuating process in recovery.
Good point. Yeah.
That I just, there are people who are doing it simply by their actions. And we now have the ability to follow up with them thanks to peer support. There's no longer the barriers of a counseling or medical practice that's governed by HIPAA. So it's okay,
Right.
you know what I mean? Like, just when you leave the doors doesn't mean we never see them again. Like, we have people contacting us. We see them out in the recovery community. We're able to continue to engage with them, not just like ignore them until they talk to us.
And I'm sure in situations like that people want to stay in touch with you as well.
They do.
Because you're part of their family almost. You create this family atmosphere.
That's the hope.
I got to ask, let me acknowledge a few others. We got Brian Sims from Rebirth with us
Hey,
right now. Brian, thanks for watching, brother. See you soon, I hope. My friend Lynn Serrano has shared this, and she's saying hello. And awesome. Okay, Lynn, thank you for joining us as well. All of you guys. And there's a bunch more out there that aren't commenting, just watching, and that's fine. Just keep watching. I got to ask, this is all happening. Who's footing the bill? So somebody's getting a bill somewhere. I want to know who.
So it's really cool. So we have had a FAR accredited sober living home in the Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough region since 2011 is when we started. 2013 when we became FAR accredited. We converted one of those homes, those FAR accredited homes, into this respite center in Clearwater, Florida, thanks to an incredibly generous grant from Baycare Hospital Systems. I went to the local homeless shelter called Safe Harbor. Unfortunately, in Pinellas County, homelessness is more akin to criminality than the support that they need. So the county has built a small concentration camp where they just drop all these people off. It's a 500-bed space, and it's huge.
Wow.
And some estimate around 93% of the people who are going through this 500 bed space have a substance use disorder or some type of issue with substances. So I went to them about a year ago now, last summer, and presented that we take 2 of those pods and run this respite center with it. See if we can help individuals who want help get connected and do that, and we wouldn't have to use a higher budget than they're already getting from the local sheriff's department. They said no, and not out of any like disagreement of the idea, but just because that would then mean taking beds away from what their current function is, which is just to provide housing for the night. And that makes sense. But a gentleman who was present there, a gentleman named Samuel Picard, who works for Bay Care Hospital, was at that presentation. And when they were looking at doing their grant cycle in the fall, he reached out to me and said, I think you should present this. And I'm incredibly grateful to Bay Care Hospital and Samuel Picard, because the idea of this is people like us are ending up in the ERs. People like us who can't find anywhere else to go. Like I used to tell people this is, hey man, if you can't get into detox, just go to a local hospital and say that you need to Baker Act yourself. That's the only way you're going to get care, and if everything else is full. And so them being aware that this is happening said, we believe this will relieve the overburdening of the emergency room. And just since the end of March, it has. I mean, like we've now seen just since the end of March, over 50 people, with 73% of them going on to an abstinence-based environment, 15% of them going to a higher level of care. And unfortunately, the remainder continue to use, because once you open up Pandora's box, you can't guarantee that anyone's going to stop.
Yeah.
And once again, we have to protect the environment. So that the respite center is for people who are trying to actively stop. Let's make it clear that once they come there, they can't continue to use.
No. This is,
But if you do want to stop and you're actively trying to do that, we want to help you. And it seems to be showing some pretty excellent results. So thanks again to Bay Care Hospital for making that grant available. That pays for our rent. That pays for our staff. We want more staff. I don't think any program will ever say that they're fully funded. You know what I mean? But it is allowing us to do the work that we're doing, and we're very grateful.
That is excellent. That is excellent. And as we here at the Addiction Training Center and Sober Life Studios learn more, we'd like to be more involved, and we're going to talk about doing that down the road. So look forward to some good things that we'll be doing together. But this is just a terrific program. Considering that maybe 10 years ago, none of these things existed.
Yeah. Even
Sober Living, I mean, FAR is only what?
Since 2000.
12 years old?
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah.
So Sober Living's, all the aftercare you got was just at the whim of whether you went to a good treatment center or not, whether you had any at all, whether you had resources or any resources. And even to the point where when you walk out of a treatment center, once they've used up all the insurance you have, and you have no more insurance to get any kind of help anywhere, people were just left to their own devices. That was not that long ago. This is a different animal now. And we're seeing something different.
And yet still we lost 8,000 people to overdose in Florida last year. And so it's interesting. So it's like we are beginning to make this shift based on necessity as well as based on just we know better now. But we are still losing people because as the shift is happening, the drugs are getting worse and the disease hasn't changed. So as the drugs become more deadly and the disease within humans, within us remains the same, we run the risk of higher mortality rates than we used to have. So it's
the combination of the different drugs that are out there now, fentanyl being, number one amongst them at this moment.
Yeah.
And I believe the still lasting effects of COVID, of the 2.5 years of isolation that, people with addictions and mental health issues realized this is the life, being separated from everybody, and they've never kind of come back. So we're still seeing some adverse effects from that. There's a lot going on out there. You're starting in the right direction. What you're doing now is working. What do you think needs to happen in the next few years to really make a dent?
So we have a unique opportunity in this state and really throughout the entire nation. as people become more aware and more willing to address this. So like the stigma towards addictions is shifting into a community effort, whether we have the experience in recovery or not, to how can we help? And there's funding actually that's starting to being made available either through the opioid abatement funds or the federal government that was looking at a 10% set aside. There's a lot of opportunities funding wise to actually help people, not to continue to throw money at a process, the acute care model that hasn't worked. So once again, human beings are not cars that can go in for a tune up and be fixed.
Yeah.
Stabilization is important, but what do we do long term, being that this is a lifelong illness like diabetes or something else? We know that it can be managed, but there is a debate on how we manage that. So then people say, okay, if they're on Suboxone or methadone for the rest of their life, at least they're not recidivizing or they're not.
Yeah.
And then there's the abstinence-based group that acts as if, somebody is accepting some type of additional medication will help, as if they're not in recovery themselves. So I guess my question, because you asked a very broad,
very broad.
There are some things that we can do immediately, like every community, in my opinion, should have a respite center. Every RCO in that community should be an absolute logical space.
Now, RCOs are not widespread even at this point. They are more than there's a lot of them.
They're getting more.
But they're not in every community. They're not in every city.
So,
and these are recovery
community organizations. So they are people who are in recovery themselves, who are coming together to build a nonprofit model, 501c3. And I am so proud that even though we started in 2017, since then, and really in just the last couple of years, Pasco has created a thriving RCO called the Hope Shot. They also do a podcast. There is the Hillsborough Recovery Coalition in Tampa that's gotten up off the ground. There's a group, and I apologize to them. I've forgotten their name, in Sarasota that's getting started. So as all of these communities, Polk County has Lakeland area has a RCO. There are communities coming together as they see the value of this. So while not everyone does, there are a lot. And so I really want to suggest that there is no need for competition in this space. We don't need to repeat the same mistakes that the treatment industry did. So as the peer support industry gets going, we can support one another. We can grow together. We can close those gaps in the system together. And thus hopefully work ourselves out of the job.
That would be nice. And, I got to mention over on this side that I know that Miami, Broward County, Palm Beach County, great RCOs in the works and that have been operating for some time now. But like I said, they're not nationally widespread, but they're getting there. They're starting to.
Yeah.
It's starting to. And these respite, peer respite organizations, they have a place to go. Beautiful thing. You personally, you could do anything else. You could do something else. You could do something else with your life that'd probably be a little bit easier to do.
I'm a cliche.
Like, I don't know, brain surgery. But you've decided to do this, which is emotionally draining, sometimes a little thankless, and certainly just heartbreaking at times.
Yeah, it can be.
Why do you do this?
I do this because people did it for me. So my particular recovery pathway is a 12-step pathway. And there is a great Dr. Bob's farewell address where 1,000 things have to go right for somebody, the pats on the back that are needed, the handshakes that we make for us to be where we are. And I'm grateful to say that I haven't found it necessary to pick up a drink or a drug since February of 2006. I believe things came together in a particular way that cannot be coincidence. And my hope is to help create an environment where those type of events can naturally occur for others. Because and I know that I liked how you said that. That was very kind to you, as if I could do something else. I feel as if this is the only thing that I can do, being that I've had personal experience, education with it, and now worked in the field since 2008. I don't know what I would do with myself without this. Maybe sit down and write my science fiction books or something. You know what I mean? Like, you know what I mean? That nobody ever reads.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like just something to so I really love what I do, and I really love getting to wake up and go hopefully try and build these environments, because we have people working for us these days who are just phenomenal at this new, like the peer certifications that they're achieving and the way in which they're applying it. I was talking to a guy yesterday where he comes alive every single day at this respite center working with these guys. And he was telling me how much he liked it. And I said, dude, you might be somebody that comes up with a brand new way of approaching this just based on your passion of how you're approaching it. You might outpace all of us, you know? So it's just nice to have an environment where people are excited about this. And it's a privilege to work with them.
It certainly is not a place where people are going to go to get rich.
No.
They did that with the treatment industry, and it almost crushed the treatment industry. They did that with some other areas, but when you're getting involved in these things, these services, this is all about passion. This is about paying it forward.
Yeah.
And this is about doing the right thing. And, I want to ask people to check it out. I know it's recoveryepicenter.org.
Yeah.
And you can learn about this. And maybe it's not something that's in your, maybe I know we got people out there that are in Wisconsin right now and out in Montana. So you're going to find places, but if you look their place up, you can find out about how they're operating. And if there's not something happening in your town, maybe you want to talk to somebody about making something happen. I want to ask one question before we close this out. Again, go to recoveryepicenterfoundation.org. You can learn all about William and the people he works with. There's a lot of people out there saying, they're saying two things. First of all, they're saying, well, addicts are always going to die. Is that ever okay?
No. So every single person that we lose to this is a failure of the industry, in my opinion. And I know that sounds harsh, because I've had many conversations with folks who believe what you just said, which is this is a terminal illness and people are just going to die. That is a weird cop-out for us not doing what we can to support individuals with what we know works. Now, do I believe that every single human being that has this illness is going to survive it? I mean, that's a really interesting question, because currently we have about a 5% survivability rating, unfortunately. So its statistics don't match my belief, is what I'm trying to say. That being said, I think that we can continue to develop new systems, continue to develop new processes. And if we aren't trying, like, what the fuck are we doing? Like, it's just one of those, like, so no, if your result is, they're just going to die, then fuck off. Don't be in the space.
Yeah, I agree with you. Because if it's one person, that is somebody's mother, father, brother, sister, husband, wife, son, or daughter who is suffering.
Yeah.
And it's somebody important to somebody. Everybody counts. Everybody deserves an equal opportunity to live and to beat this thing. And I don't know that we'll ever get to a point where we can completely beat it, but I don't think we should ever accept when we're not completely beating something. I think we should say, and again, it is a fault. The industry fell short. It's a failure. However, maybe it's an unavoidable failure because we have to learn as we go. It's when we stop learning and we stand still, but we got to keep learning. It will get better. I have a feeling it will. Now, speaking of Will, it will, and here's Will. People are also saying, well, I can't do anything. I'm not even an addict or an alcoholic. How can people get involved in their communities? Because you're the community guy. How can they get involved in their communities, even if they just want to help out or make a little bit of a difference?
So it's an amazing question. So we were really blessed in the last year to be featured by our local news programs, Bay News 9, ABC Channel 10, CBS, I think Channel 10. I might have messed up which thing
Okay.
that is. Channel 10. And what they did, because we did this big Narcan push out on Clearwater Beach for spring break, where we wanted to make sure that these tourists who were coming to Florida were able to survive, the week that they were here. And normally that.
Wait, Florida is not a death sentence. I'm just telling people. It sounds like it. Let me tell you. And if you're a liberal these days, you may as well just jump off the plane. No, go ahead.
So, if you were to come to Clearwater and accidentally cross-dress or anything. No, anyway. So not that there's anything wrong with that.
No.
Yeah.
It's just we're funny how we're fighting the wrong battles.
Yeah. So they did this present. It was really cool. They came out and saw what we were doing, distributing Narcan to the local bars, to the hotels, and they did a news story on it. And because of that, because the news highlighted this effort, we found that 80% of the businesses out on Clearwater Beach were inviting us in to bring the Narcan in and to be a part of it. So your voice, whether you are a person in recovery or just a supporter, is incredibly important. And as that shift continues to happen away from the criminality, the morality, the idea that having a substance use disorder makes you a bad person, all of these false narratives, as they start to shift, your voice of saying, hey, that person deserves love, that person deserves help, that person deserves an opportunity for them to rectify their mistakes, all of that matters. So please, how you speak to your community representatives, how you speak in your neighborhoods and in your families, all of those things matter. So I want to thank you all for your support and continued efforts to save our brothers and sisters who are someone's child and someone's parent.
Thank you. That is actually brilliantly put. It doesn't have to be, you don't have to open your wallet to help. I mean, certainly there are recovery organizations that could use some financial support, certainly, or maybe some volunteer time or some help from your business. You got a printing business or you got something you want to help. But
we'll take that.
The biggest thing that you can do is stop the proliferation of the stigma and talk about things openly in your supermarkets and in your mental health, addiction, substance abuse. We'll even talk about domestic violence and all those things. All these things that have stayed hidden for years are finally coming out, and addiction is part of that. So let's make it a part of that. We've got the Me Too movement. We got all these other things out there. We got, and we're talking about race openly now. We're doing a lot of things openly. Let's make sure we're talking about addiction and substance abuse openly, so that we can take the stigma out of it.
Absolutely.
And yes, do people who are in addiction a lot of times end up doing things that are not good and that are bad things? Yes, of course they do. Does that make them a bad person? You know what? I guess it really doesn't matter. What it does is it makes them a person who can be helped. It makes them a person who can be helped. You can make the decision about whether they're good or bad when you finally meet them without all that.
Well, and maybe we could just be good people.
Maybe we could just be good people. That's a good idea.
Yeah,
stop looking around and waiting for everybody else to do the right thing. And why don't you? Why don't you?
And that way we can get back to the things that matter, like
I
vilifying Disney. I'm just
Really? We're just going to bash everybody here today. You're going to get me banned in all the schools.
I know.
Can't talk about this show.
Hey, have you registered yet? That's the question.
Have I read? No.
Have you registered?
No. I can walk around with a gun strapped to my hip now in Florida without a problem. But if I've got a garter belt, then I need to go to jail.
So that's what I'm just so grateful for. So now that we are finally addressing, and able to talk about people with substance use disorders openly, we can go back to, like more repressive times.
It can't last. It can't last. This is a fluke. But move forward, talk about these things. And if you don't understand it within your family, look to your friends and look to your neighbors and look to your coworkers and stuff and look upon them. There is somebody, if you know 5 people then you probably know 4 people whose lives have been affected by either mental health disorders or substance abuse disorders. If you know 5 people, you know 4 of them have been affected. So this is how big this thing is. And if we simply talked about it like it's a problem we're all dealing with, it would make things a lot easier.
Yeah.
So, and connect with people like Will Atkinson. Will, you'll be back. You and I are going to be doing some series of shows together to draw a line and point some fingers at some issues, and certainly celebrate some victories, because I don't want to make it sound doom and gloom. There are a lot of victories going on out there. We need to celebrate those too, right?
And if this ever goes on the road at all, I would love for you guys to come out and get some of the stories from these dudes in the and women in the respite center. They have a story to tell, and they are super excited about recovery. So it is just an amazing opportunity.
My friend Karen's with us from Crazy Bad Costumes. Karen, how you doing? Anybody need a costume? Go on down to Crazy Bad Costumes, Fort Lauderdale. In case you get sober, you got to dress up. Come on, go get a costume.
Absolutely, I'm in.
Brian says, hey, if you're alive, you have a chance to recover.
Yeah,
absolutely. And Karen added also that recovery is hard, is so hard.
Yeah,
it is. Anything alone is hard.
And
lifting a large rock alone is hard. But the more people that you have, the easier it becomes, until it becomes almost effortless because you have so much support.
Yes, sir.
Right?
Absolutely. Connection. It's the opposite of addiction, and we get to do it together. So it's an honor to get to connect with you today.
Hey, as always, my friend, I appreciate you taking the time to come on to our Sober Life podcast. I want to thank all of you. I know this was a pop-up out of the blue, just last-minute thing, but we're going to be around a whole lot more. You'll be seeing us a couple times a week with different shows, different programmings, and please share it with your friends. And we'll get together. And if you have any ideas that you'd like to share, please check me out at where do you want to check me out? I'll tell you what, check me out go to soberlifestudios.com. There's our YouTube channel. You can leave me a message right on there. soberlifestudios.com. For now, I want to thank my guest, William Atkinson, from the Recovery Epicenter Foundation. Please check it out, recoveryepicentrefoundation.org. Will, thank you very much. I'm Scott Jones. All of you, thank you for taking a little bit of time out of your day to talk about sobriety and recovery. We'll catch you next time.